What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Howard, and joining me this week, we have Becky Hansis-O'Neill.
How's it going?
Webster Heffern.
Hi, everybody.
And two very special guests, James Ott and Jenn Voss. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
So, James and Jenn, you are a guest for this week. Can you give a little intro of who you are? What do you do at UMSL here?
We work at UMSL Sustainability. We're also a part of the Environmental Adventure Club, and they work a lot together.
Nice. And you, James?
Yes, I'm also a student worker at UMSL Sustainability, and I love everything nature and plants. So.
Very cool. Well, we're very excited to have you on the show. We're going to do the news as we always do, and our topic of the show, since you're both from UMSL Sustainability, is going to be all about sustainability. So we'll hop right into it. Our first story this week comes to us from Smithsonian Magazine. This is all about hurricanes and how destructive they are. So some scientists have basically been tracking hurricanes for many, many decades. And as part of their research, they've looked at the changes in the intensity of the hurricanes and sort of how often they're occurring, so on and so forth. And they've basically found out, which this isn't too surprising based on, climate change and everything, that hurricanes are becoming much more destructive nowadays than they used to be, and they are becoming much more frequent as well. We live in the Midwest. We don't have a lot of hurricanes here, but from, I guess, everyone's life experience, how have you experienced many hurricanes from past years before the Midwest, or if you've only lived in the Midwest, maybe you don't have that much knowledge about it? How is that for everyone?
I'll say I do specifically remember Hurricane Katrina. We had a rainstorm from that, which, was nowhere near a hurricane. But I just remember there being a lot of rain. But I also have born and raised here, so I'm very familiar with, tornado warnings, things like that. But no, I have not experienced an actual hurricane, and I hope I never do.
Okay, that's fair. Becky, Webster, how about you both?
I have experienced one hurricane, but I was kind of inland in Boston at the time. I can't remember which storm it was. It was fall of 2012. So it was one of those that hit New York really hard, and it didn't hit Boston that hard. And for some reason, the area of Boston where I was had zero wind, zero rain. I was in this weird bubble that it wasn't the eye of the storm per se, but it was this weird bubble where nothing got hit.
Okay. Yeah, my hurricane experience when I lived in Virginia and Maryland was mostly just we'd get heavy rainstorms because Florida would always get hit, but then it's so far inland that nothing really happens. We just get heavy rain, so not really flash flooding or anything, thankfully, too bad. But nowadays I feel like hurricanes are hitting the area where my folks live a lot more, and I'm I worry about them, but the other thought I have is, thank God I'm over here in the Midwest where there's not any hurricanes, but then we also have tornadoes, so that's kind of the trade-off with that. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else notable in the article. The article seems somewhat clear-cut. I'm trying to remember. Oh, the one thing I wanted to bring up is that they mentioned that it's not entirely clear-cut if it's greenhouse gas emission that's causing the frequent hurricanes. They mentioned that there's a lack of aerosol pollution, there's less aerosol pollution, so that's actually maybe contributing to more hurricanes, which is kind of a weird finding that pollution acts as a mitigator in that sense.
So, in the end of the article, they talked about potentially actually having less frequent hurricanes, but more intense ones when they did, which I thought was interesting. And then the article itself was less about frequency and more about the hurricanes we do have spin up a lot faster within 24 hours than they did, 10, 20 years ago. So at the end, to me, I was like, wow, there's a lot of conflicting information here.
I did think an important point, though, is that it's the rising surface temperatures that are really contributing to this rapid acceleration of wind speeds over that 24-hour period. They said something about, I guess, the heat from the ocean contributes to higher humidity for these storms, and then that energy somehow gets transferred into wind.
And that seems like a big problem if you're preparing for hurricanes, regardless of how frequent they are. If they're spinning up from a Category 1 to a Category 3 in a 24-hour period, that's a really shorter window to get people to evacuate or prepare.
Yeah. Though I do notice when I watch the news nowadays, even when they have just a Category 1, because they are expecting it possibly to be a Category 3 within 24 hours, they can actually preemptively start evacuating.
Ah, that makes sense. We learn.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question, Webster. Do you actually sit down and watch the news regularly? At your couch and your TV?
I haven't in a while, but like whenever I do watch it and there's a hurricane watch or whatever going on, then this is what I've tended to notice.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, much more of a text alert, just what's the internet chatter saying about hurricanes and all that. Any other thoughts on this article before we jump to the next one? Again, I know it's pretty clear-cut. Sometimes science can be very obvious and direct. All right. Next, we have an article from BBC News, so not in America, but in good old England. This is all about recycling reforms, seeing additional waste bins used for future recycling collections down the line. So this is basically talking about how England is hopefully by early 2026 attempting to add food recycling to their, collection of recycling bins overall. And this would kind of help alleviate some of the just people throwing everything they can in one place and trying to separate it out. But it sounds like there is some criticism going on, and people are just kind of saying this is just adding to the already broken recycling system that we have in England, which I know England is not here, so it's not one-to-one. But I thought that was kind of an interesting take, how there's criticism for trying to become more, specified with recycling and have more, not accountability, but just go about it in a more detailed manner.
They mentioned a politician in the article that there was a proposal floating around to switch to a 7-bin sorting system, and this politician was like very clear that, no, I don't support 7 bins. It's too many bins. Made me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, I did appreciate, though, that they are still increasing the number of bins, because I think single stream is definitely a broken system. It's just too much for them to sort at the recycling plant. There's got to be a middle ground if recycling is to work. That being said, I agree that the most important point in the article was at the very end. This is an already broken system. It's going to be very hard, if even possible, to fix it. What we really need to do is reduce plastic production and waste in the first place.
Yeah, I was surprised that they... wait, did someone else...
Oh, I just said, here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. The one thing I was surprised is that they're not going to implement this until March of 2026. I thought that was a little further out than one would think. Like, I didn't think it would be that long to implement such a system if it's just adding an additional bin. Granted, I may know nothing about the England recycling system, but I thought that was like, wow, it's like almost like 2.5, 3 years out. Like, that seems a little far. Like, you could probably do it a little sooner, maybe.
It was my project manager... spidey senses started tingling, and I thought 3 years, that's pretty fast.
Oh, okay. Is it does it take a long time to roll these things out?
In my opinion, I've never done project management for civil engineering or recycling, that kind of thing, but just for like construction projects and how to get new systems implemented, to me that seemed like a pretty quick turnaround.
Okay. Do you, James or Jen, do you have any insight onto the sort of process that you know of?
I feel like as an American, I can't really critique anybody else's recycling system, since ours is arguably the worst in my opinion. But yeah, I thought, this isn't necessarily England, but my partner teaches German, and he recently went to Germany, and he was telling me all about the recycling system and how you have to, like, I don't know if it's seven boxes, but they definitely have way more sorting to do, and I liked it. I mean, it didn't take that much longer to do, and I feel like it actually, as opposed to a single stream system, I feel like stuff actually gets sorted and recycled. Whereas when I recycle in America, I often feel like, is this really going to a recycling center, or are they just dumping it in the waste with everything else?
Yeah, we did a recycling episode about a month ago, and just from the St. Louis Dispatch, the statistics are very low. It's like, of all the things that are recycled, it's like maybe a third actually get recycled. The rest just goes to the landfill because they just don't have time to sort it or the resources to sort all that stuff. It's just, yeah, it's kind of sad.
Or they once did, but then they discontinued that, and then they keep the old, like, recycling and trash split things. And you see all these TikTok videos of people opening the door, and it's all just one bin that it goes into.
Oh.
So they may have had it at one point, but then they lost it.
Okay.
Continue the charade.
Are you guys able to recycle at your places of residence here in St. Louis?
Yes.
Yes, we have a recycling program. It is single stream, but I do feel a little more confident. Considering where I grew up, we did not have a recycling system, so.
Okay. Yeah, I talked about this on the show. We need recycling. Unfortunately, both apartments I've lived at don't. Everything just goes in the dumpster. So there's no real way to mitigate that, unfortunately.
I will say we do recycle at UMSL, so
Yes, that is good as a university.
Separate bins.
We make sure of it.
Right.
Cool. All right, moving on to our last article. This comes to us from Gizmodo. So this is all about the energy electrical system in the United States getting potentially a $3.5 billion upgrade. The Department of Energy has announced that in the coming years, they're hoping to basically invest this large chunk of money to fund 58 projects around 44 states. Hopefully one of those states is Missouri, because we could certainly use it, to basically upgrade all the grids, to basically be able to provide more power, of course, but also to withstand all of the constant battering that the electrical systems get from extreme weather. I don't know if you guys remember Texas 2022, and they got hit by that snowstorm, and their entire power grid was knocked out for, I think a month or more. My first thought was, thank goodness I went to school in Missouri and I didn't go to that Texas school.
Yeah.
So what do we think about this energy upgrade in terms of just providing more energy and more, I guess, sustainable energy and energy that's an energy system that's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Robust, yes. Thank you. For the United States.
Definitely think it's a good thing. I was shocked to learn that most of our energy grid is over 50 years old, basically as old as my parents. So it's definitely interesting to see that, especially as we move more towards electrification of cars and gas stoves are starting to go out. So especially just with more people, there's going to be more energy use, electric energy use. So it's good to see. I hope that we'll see how it's rolled out. Talking about project times, we'll see how long it takes, but hopefully it gets done.
Yeah, I hope that regardless of if Biden stays or if there's a different president, that this plan continues to go into effect. It doesn't just get grind to a halt. That's always my worry with changes in administration, where things that would benefit regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, if they just stop, and it's
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jeremy. There's all these projects that we can get so excited about, but if they are multi-year projects and they are going to cross administrations, there's always the chance that it'll just be stalled or shut down in some way. I was wondering, do you guys think that what happened in Hawaii recently on Maui had anything to do with provoking them to want to redo the power grid?
Can you elaborate a little bit? Because I'm not sure.
So there was something to do with downed power lines contributing to the fires that swept across Maui.
Oh, I didn't know they knew the cause of the fire. I just thought they said, we're not sure what happened.
I thought it was the downed power lines made it to where the emergency evacuation notification system did not work. So there were no alarms.
Okay. But regardless, they were downed power lines in the first place, and they contributed to more mess.
Yeah, that's...
So I'm wondering if that kind of helped prompt them to say, well, our whole power grid is really old. Let's fix this up and make it more climate resilient.
Yeah, I'm sure that, and then also just the heat that Texas got from the snowstorm probably did not help either. I'm sure there was mounting evidence of, look at all these terrible things that are happening, and this is making the government look really, really bad, so we need to address this.
Right. I definitely see anecdotal evidence around St. Louis. In my neighborhood, I drove by a power pole. It just had split in half.
Oh.
No one hit it. It just fell over.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I definitely think, I don't know for sure, this is based on what I heard on the internet, so take that with a grain of salt. But I did hear a contributing factor of the fire in Maui was neglect of the power lines.
Okay.
So not surprised to see corporate greed being a cause there. But I will say, as you mentioned, Becky, a lot of power lines in my area are either covered with invasive vines, which pull them down, and a lot of invasive trees as well that grow along those fence rows on those areas that aren't mowed. So that, upgrades are good, but even just doing good ecological practices can help reduce those kind of nature effects from wind and ice, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And this is a different topic, but I think it's somewhat relevant. So my neighborhood is not a wealthy neighborhood. And when some of our older trees die, even if they're not active unless they're actively interfering with the power line, no one will pay to remove them. So they could still fall on a power line. They could fall on somebody's house, and property owners can't necessarily afford to pay a couple $1,000s to have them removed. So that's, at least in St. Louis, I see that as an issue. And I know we have a lot of initiatives to plant trees and take care of our trees to get rid of heat island effects. It's all intertwined.
That's interesting you bring that up, Becky. For the Conservation Forum on the urban heat island stuff, which was at the zoo, I want to say a month and a half ago, one of the things to mitigate urban heat island effects, so why it's so hot in cities, is to plant trees. But there were some audience members that say, well, people who live in poor neighborhoods, if their trees, fall over, that, damages houses and power lines. So maybe they actually don't want trees in their neighborhood to mitigate the heat effect because of this, potential for the trees fall over and no one's going to deal with it because the communities are so poor. So I thought that was an interesting sort of counter argument to, it's not as simple as planting trees as we would like it to be. So that was just some food for thought on how that kind of all mixes together.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of issues that environmentalists run into is the fact that America is very reactionary and not precautionary. So we wait until these very last-minute damaging incidents happen before we do anything about it. So if there was a more of a precautionary approach to planting these trees, maybe these poor neighborhoods wouldn't feel as threatened by the aspect of neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or some kind of safety net to just help remove the tree once it's dead and plant a new one. There's one in a property that's adjacent to me, and part of it fell over, and we talked with our neighbors, and they just can't afford to remove it, and it is right by a power line. So it's a real thing. They're just kind of stuck, and hopefully it doesn't fall on their house.
Yeah.
I will say, an organization I learned about recently over the summer is Beyond Housing, which Beyond Housing and the name, beyond just helping people who are unhoused or struggling with housing security, they have an entire conservation division, and a part of that division is urban tree, either removal or maintenance. So they often work in these lower income areas in North St. Louis County and City to help homeowners with problem trees that they may not have the money to do that. So I think it can be a valid critique that urban trees can end up causing more trouble with power lines, but I also think, as talked about in the Conservation Forum, the cost of doing nothing, for example, letting those fence rows grow and those trees just grow into power lines, that's another major contributor. So having those programs in place to help maintain the urban trees and help homeowners, I think, is a good thing. And obviously that's not accessible to everybody. Not everywhere has an organization like Beyond Housing. So I think it also falls onto the utility companies. I feel like there's a lot of arguments whether it's the homeowner's responsibility or the utility company, but in my view, if it's right underneath a power line, they often claim that that's utility line property. That I think that should be the responsibility of a utility company to cover that cost and not the homeowner.
Okay. Well said. All right, we're going to transition now to topic of the show. So, James and Jen, we have you. You are from UMSL Sustainability, and naturally, it would make sense to do a topic of the show all about sustainability. So we're happy you're here. I want to launch off the conversation, and of course, Becky and Webster, feel free to jump in as you see fit, to just talking about what is sustainability. This is a nice sort of green buzzword we have, but what does it actually mean for us? Whoever wants to take that.
I pulled up a really nice definition that I found. If I can pull it up again, that would be awesome.
While she looks for that, I will say I feel like sustainability, like you said, is a buzzword that can really mean a lot of different things. For me personally, my personal definition would be anything that revolves around reducing fossil fuel use, reducing waste, ecological restoration. There's really a lot of different aspects to it, and I think every single industry can have a sustainability department and have sustainability be relevant to them.
So sustainability as a definition is the ability to keep maintaining something at a certain rate. But our sustainability departments and most sustainability departments are focused on conserving an ecological balance by avoiding depletion of natural resources.
Okay. So basically all about keeping what we have now and making sure future generations have it, and not just burning it all up, whatever that resource might be.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Big
Cool.
picture.
Big picture, indeed. And you both are from UMSL Sustainability, so do you want to give a little pitch for what you guys do, what your organization is all about? Because not a lot of people on campus know about UMSL Sustainability.
Yeah. A lot of people are interested in the garden. They'll see the posters for the garden everywhere and then they'll ask us what sustainability is. Mostly what me and James do are student outreach events. So things like the Lunch and Learn that's happening today. That's at 11:30 in the MSC on the top floor. So we plan things that are educational for the students here and also resources like spending time in the community garden can be a mental health resource for some people. We have a lot of data analyst people at the garden.
Oh, really?
Shout out to
Okay.
you guys. So people in computing majors that may spend a lot of time in front of the computer. It's nice to get outside. We also donate the food from the community garden to the Triton Pantry. So we provide a lot of different resources for the students in making sure that the campus is sustainable. And we also try to have fun things as well. Like we'll have a harvest party earlier in November, I think, is what we're looking at.
Yes, kind of wrapping up the garden for the season.
Yeah.
Since it's getting colder, things are not growing. So
Yeah.
I will say, sustainability at UMSL, to kind of get the structure, we have Katie Mike, who is the director. We love Katie Mike. I think she's been here since 2012.
Wow, okay.
So she's kind of taken the initiative. And there's student workers as well. We're mainly run by student workers, which is kind of a double-edged sword because you have all these new ideas and inspiration, but then you also have a lot of turnover. Students graduate and classes overtake work sometimes, so sometimes it can be a little difficult to get everything through in a timely manner. But we are here and we are trying our best in doing things. Sustainability is responsible for all the recycling on campus. So any of the recycling bins you see, that's from us. We make sure that it goes to the proper recycling bin. We also, as Jen mentioned, the student workers, we more focus on outreach events. I will say it kind of depends on whatever the student worker is interested in. It can kind of vary, like I said, with turnover, it kind of varies what the focus is. I'll say my focus has really been native plantings, urban tree canopy. So we recently had the Department of Conservation come and speak about urban conservation, leading into what Jen had said. We have a whole Lunch and Learn series for the month of October. So each week we've had different guest speaker, a different topic. We've had urban conservation. We've had World Food Day to talk about food insecurity, and the Triton Pantry, our partnership with them. Any volunteers in the garden who don't take the harvest home, anything left over we donate to the pantry. So that's been a really good partnership that we've recently started up. Again, it had died with COVID, so I'm really happy that we were able to get that done again. And yeah, I'd say it's kind of our main things right now. We're a little bit in a transition process from COVID. I would say COVID really put a damper on the garden. So yeah, we've just been trying to build that back up. We had a really good growing season, so I'm excited to see. Although it's like the end of the growing season, I'm so happy to see what happens next spring and what we're able to do.
That's awesome. So you mentioned real quick, you get some data analysts. Are those like full-time faculty or those students? What are they doing exactly?
I meant students, like majors.
Okay.
People who show. Faculty and alumni are also welcome to show up to the garden. We accept anybody from the UMSL campus to come and help. It's a good time. We like to hang out, and if you're more of a loner, you can go to like one of the beds on the edges, or you can all like crowd one of the beds together and weed things, and then you start talking more and you start weeding slower. But the beds get really meticulously picked through and cleaned out, and it's just better for everybody. The more people that show up, not too many hands.
Right.
In terms of science, just jumping in, you have the restored prairie right next to the community garden. And I know Missouri Department of Conservation has done bumblebee surveys over there. The General Ecology Lab does biodiversity monitoring in an unofficial capacity. And there's also a weather station, and I forget if it belongs to WashU or SLU.
That is WashU, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I will say sustainability does kind of run the community garden at this point. In the past, it was started in 2015, I believe around 2015, by the Honors College. It was a program that they had. The professor who ran it retired around the time of COVID, so going back to where everything died around COVID.
Yep.
So then we kind of took control and we're building it back up. But we do have the community garden that's about teaching people to grow food no matter your experience. I think what Jen was kind of referencing is no matter your major, you could be a computer scientist, someone who likes computers, and you can still come out to the garden and learn about it and have a good time. But also, we want to make sure it's a place for science as well. The Restored Prairie, we absolutely welcome anybody to come and do any sort of research, anything like that. Especially, I feel like those wildlife is specifically not as common in urban areas, so to have this little sanctuary space, especially on a college campus, is a great opportunity for research. So, yeah, anybody who wants to do that, just let us know, and you can come on out.
Very cool. So in terms of maybe going a little more broadly from UMSL Sustainability, the students on campus, or maybe the larger St. Louis community, what are ways that we can kind of be more sustainable overall? Well, maybe we'll start with UMSL campus, since the students are kind of our immediate target and demographic here.
Well, we can start by making sure that we try and pack our lunches sustainably, zero-waste lunches. That's something the zoo where I work at also tries to encourage as well. So you can save money, save plastic, and pack your own lunch. There's also, if you are on a meal plan here, you can make sure that there are compostable
Utensils.
Containers
Yes.
and containers. If you're on the meal plan here, that's what I was getting at. You can have, we handed out, what are they called? Reusable utensil packages. So you have like this little wrap up of like bamboo or steel utensils that you can bring with you on campus. You just like wrap it up and throw it in your book bag. So when you're eating on campus here, you don't have to get the plastic utensils out. There's a bunch of like small things. I think it would take me a while to get through them all, but I would say like looking into zero waste, like just zero waste as a concept, and like there's zero waste lotion, there's zero waste deodorant that you can get. The Hey Humans one, I really like that one. There's a bunch of small things, but on a broader scale, I would say being more involved with like student government, events that we put on, of course, following us on Triton Connect, all that kind of good stuff. Being involved like with campus activities, I would say.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. There's definitely different aspects of it. And I feel like when you think of sustainability, you tend to go to like recycling, like reduce, reuse, recycle, which I think is definitely a good message, but at the same time, not everything has to fall on you as the consumer. There's definitely things you can do, like reusable utensils, and but I think the best thing to do personally is to focus on the reduce part. Just reduce the amount of plastic you use, since our recycling system isn't the best and not everything gets recycled. Just reducing it in itself is one of the best things you can do, and as well as advocacy. I think at the end of the day, a lot of corporations need to be held responsible for the waste they produce. So getting involved in student government, or just politics itself, and that sort of green advocacy is a great way as well. And I think another part is nature. We have to sustain our natural resources. So learning about invasive species, learning about native pollinators, and all types of ecological interactions, and how you can help that, I think, is another important step. I think when people think of wildlife or a green space, they just see green and they think it's okay. But the problem is, with the way that humans have so dramatically changed the world, almost every part of wildlife that existed before is no longer the same. So you have to manage habitats. You have to manage wildlife in a sense. So
Oh, you're speaking my language.
Yes,
Jan.
absolutely.
When I see our campus and it looks like a golf course with these beautiful manicured lawns, I think, oh no, why don't we manage our campus like it's an urban wildlife habitat? Why don't we swap out our non-natives for native plants and help pollinators? And so I'm all on board with that.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of it comes down to the norm. And as Jen had mentioned before, reactionary. A lot of people are reactionary. So if you mention anything other than a grass lawn, it turns into a debate of like, oh, bugs and bees and all these things. It's easier to just go with the norm, what we already know. So yeah, changing the mindset is also an important part of it.
Speaking of changing, though, we used to have more native plants on campus. We used to have that nice little sanctuary right in front of Stadler, or on the backside of Stadler. Do you guys know the story behind why that was eliminated?
Absolutely. I would love to talk about that.
Spill the tea.
Yeah, so the Stadler Garden, before my time, but I have heard many a story about it. It was a native garden that was planted outside Stadler Hall, and from what I understand is the person who was in charge of grounds at the time was very much an advocate of a golf course, perfectly manicured lawn, and allegedly there was a complaint from a student that they were uncomfortable walking by the native plantings. And this was around the time of COVID as well. So the garden had become less maintained. It was a little bit overgrown. So without anyone's knowledge, it was mowed down, and it was from what I understand, a very tough decision, and one that nobody really approved of but this one person. But I will say that person no longer works at the university, so I am happy to say hopefully nothing will be mowed over anymore, and because of that, I definitely feel like my focus has been on restoring plots like that, not necessarily the Stadler Garden itself, but we are working on 3 native garden beds right outside the rec center along the Greenway Trail. We received a grant from the National Wildlife Federation, and we got like over 500 native plant plugs. So
Nice.
We have 2 of the 3 beds planted. We still have a 3rd one to do, but it's all run on volunteers. So keep a lookout on Triton Connect. We'll post volunteer event days where you can come out and help us plant. We're hoping to get that last bed in before it starts to get too cold. And I discovered recently that along West Drive, where the Chancellor's residence is, all the way up to Natural Bridge Road, we received a grant from the Department of Conservation, and we're working with, believe it's JDM Ecological Services. That's our environmental contractor. But they do a lot of native restoration work, and they're going to turn that whole section on to West Drive into a drainage basin. They're going to reconstruct it and plant all natives there, so that will be another little native sanctuary we have, in addition to the South Campus Prairie plot. We also have an MDC grant along the upper part of West Drive, so it is starting to become a little bit overrun with honeysuckle. So we'll probably hoping to put out some events on Triton Connect coming up to help rid that and teach people about invasives. But yes, that is a very good question. I'm very sad about the Stadler Garden, but I'm also excited to see what we're doing next and how we can prevent something like that from happening again, because that definitely was not a good decision, in my opinion, and I don't think anybody really had a say in it. So, going forward, we are hoping to add more and maintain what we have. I will say an issue that we often run into, especially what I mentioned earlier, habitat management is an active process. It's not something you can just leave without it becoming overrun with invasives and things like that. So finding volunteers can be difficult sometimes. But that is one of our goals. We've been steadily building volunteers almost every volunteer event. So
Okay, very nice.
yeah, if you love native gardens, you want to see that and see more of them, definitely get involved with sustainability and the UMSL Green Team, which is basically the sustainability's Green Team. We
It's a
we do.
Teams channel
Yes,
on
it's
Microsoft.
a Microsoft Teams channel. If you come to one of our events, we can get you added. But we basically do environmental stewardship. It's basically all volunteer based and all service based. So every event we do is a service project, mainly focused on trash cleanups or invasive species removal, native plantings. So yeah, if that interests you, come check us out on our Triton Connect. Come to an event and get involved.
Very cool. So Webster brought up the idea of, well, actually, James, you brought the idea of changing minds first, and then Webster kind of piggybacked on that. Do you find, maybe not necessarily, maybe with the students a little bit, but is there any sort of like pushback to sustainable endeavors, like potentially one for students who are generally very poor? It's hard to be sustainable because it costs more money, and we don't have the money to be sustainable. Money is one aspect. Are there other aspects like that that you kind of find that have been a challenge, not just as sustainability, but also just trying to influence people to be more sustainable?
Yes, absolutely. You bring up a good point. I think something that happens a lot with sustainability and recycling is we often feel guilty, which I don't think you should feel guilty about using that plastic straw, because, it's one straw out of many, and as long as you're working to reduce, that's the main thing. It doesn't mean you can never use a plastic straw or plastic utensil. Sometimes that's all you have available, and that's all you can afford, and that's totally okay. I think the mindset has always, the focus has been on the consumer and what the consumer can do, but I think we need to think more about what companies can do to reduce their waste. At the end of the day, it's companies that produce almost, I believe it's at least half, but it could be over half of emissions, like carbon emissions. So really, I think the narrative needs to be shifted from guilt-tripping consumers and more guilt-tripping these companies that contribute all of this waste to the planet.
I will add on to my zero waste comment. There are zero waste practices that can actually save you tons of money. Like wool dryer balls, you buy a pack of them at Walmart for $4, and you never have to buy dryer sheets for up to 4 or 5 years, depending on how you maintain it. But there are also some finding a good zero waste sunscreen has been the most expensive endeavor that I've gone through. So it's really there are choices that you can make that will save you money, and then there are greenwashing items where it'll be eco-friendly, green packaging, but it's entirely plastic. There are choices that you can make, but there are choices that you should be asking the company why they made them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to bring this up, and I want to call it out. So speaking of greenwashing, something that's been popping up recently is, quote, compostable goods, compostable cups, compostable utensils. If you look on any of these packages, there's usually a small asterisk that says, unless you recycle this at a certain facility, which may not be available in your area, it's not compostable. And this is a problem we've been dealing with in the community garden compost pile. We do encourage volunteers, if not everybody, but if you volunteer at the garden and you're familiar with composting, please come do it here. The problem is we've run into a lot of this, quote, compostable goods, which are not compostable in a backyard compost pile. So look out for that. They're usually more expensive, so I would say if you're going to choose between a compostable one and a plastic one, weigh your options. But in my opinion, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not here for the whole compostable cup thing, compostable utensils, unless they truly are compostable in your backyard. But that's just my little soapbox there.
Yeah.
on that subject.
If you're really passionate about composting and you don't live on campus, or you do live on campus, we don't really have a good compost system here. We're trying to greenlight it. We think that would be a really cool project for us to get into, but it does not exist yet. There are plenty of different programs in St. Louis that will give you a bucket where you can put all of your compostables in, and it's sealed so it doesn't smell bad, and they come pick it up on a basis, and you can pay for that service to come and do it for you.
So Becky Webster, I know you've been a little quiet. Do you have any questions for James or Jen? I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking through, I guess it was the original proposal when creating the sustainability office. I'm not sure how this fits into the whole timeline of its existence, but it had a few different sections on it. It had education, energy, food and dining. One of the sections was emissions, and I was wondering how that might be distinguished from transportation or green building or energy.
Okay. I will say we do, in the past, we've had students who read through our energy bills. I mean, we have files and files of energy bills. Katie Mike is personally responsible for paying the utility bills on campus for certain things.
Not with her own money. Just
not with her own money.
Wow, she got some deep pockets.
Right.
like, wow, she's dedicated.
But that is part of her job. So we've had students in the past who like statistics, and we'll go through those and figure out, basically calculating how much emissions we're putting out and how we can reduce them. I will say, I'm a plant guy, so I'm not really part of that sphere of sustainability, but I do know that is an aspect of it, and I think it is important, especially with, I think a good portion of it can be like mowing. How can we reduce mowing? I mean, gas mowers put out so many emissions, and I will say I don't specifically know what the emissions gauge, because that's not my side of sustainability.
I was gonna say, should I call Elijah?
Right, but there is definitely a part of sustainability that works on that. I will say I don't believe we have a student worker at the moment. That's one of those things I talked about, with turnover and relying on a lot of student workers, that priorities can shift based on semester. So there's definitely been an aspect of sustainability, and really, I think it just goes back to we need more funding. But yes, sorry, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, last year Elijah was a student worker who did a greenhouse gas emissions portfolio for the school, basically, and he found that the biggest contributor would be the students who commute in their personal vehicles, since we are a very large commuter school. So they also found we're looking into geothermal energy for the school, which is going to be really cool. Right now, we're just kind of looking at where those wells would go and what buildings would be connected to that system. So very exciting. Many things are in the works, which is what has our advisor, Katie Mike, mostly tied up in. So the student workers are kind of running free with trying to coordinate all of these events at the moment, which is what we're more focused on while she's doing all of that.
Yes. I will also say the sustainability master plan is completely being reworked right now. So I don't know the specifics of what has changed and what will be done with, what will be added. But I will say that the master plan is being reworked. So I'm hoping I can see it soon and see what changes have planned.
What is the master plan exactly?
So it's basically outlines what sustainability is trying to do.
That's the Sustainability Action Plan, which is part of the master plan.
Okay.
The master plan for UMSL.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The master plan is like all planned construction and renovations and stuff for the next couple of years. It's like this big pamphlet that they hand out in the facilities management place where we're located. The sustainability department is a part of facilities management. We're in that office underneath the parking garage across from the MSC. We have our own little office in there just filled with event supplies piled up on the sides of the walls and stuff. We have all of our pins on this cork board. It's a very student worker aesthetic. What was I talking about?
I'd be curious for both of y'all's opinion on this. It's interesting to me that the university will, and maybe they just have more free capital funds than they do for salary, but digging up money for hydrothermal wells, but not assistance for Katie Mike that could make these projects that both of you are talking about more evergreen. So as students graduate, you're just training somebody else, and there's more, just a couple staff, and then maybe even a development officer. who can apply for grants.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
so what do you think? Is there a way to get UMSL on board and say these capital improvements are great, but we really need a couple staff members?
That's the question. I think that's what we're all working on right now. We're relying a lot on volunteers to get student involvement pretty high, which helps provide a case for some more like permanent staff members. So it's all about providing like a precedence for it. Again, a reactionary way of looking at it, I think.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I wish I had an answer. That's one thing I agree with. I wish we had a little more support. Currently we have one grounds person.
1.5.
One and a half.
We have a part-timer.
So that makes it very difficult. And one thing I've noticed is all of our mowing on campus is outsourced to contractors, which I feel like if the amount of money that is spent on contractors would be better spent hiring somebody full time to actually mow. And I think having somebody full time who is in charge of things like that cares more about it. It's more personal to them. You know, with contractors, they tend to mow over our trees that we plant. They kind of rough things up, which I don't blame them. You know, it's just a job to them. Like it's, you know, where one of their jobs, they're off to the next site.
It depends on how clearly we mark off, you know, because some of the things we plant do look like weeds to people.
Right. But even if we don't, you know, they just get mowed over. So
Yeah.
I think having somebody on campus who is here every day and can see the progress and work they're doing is a way to, improve that and save our trees. We're planting trees, but they get mowed over. So please stop mowing over our trees.
I think the main problems is like finding a place to store the mowers, finding someone who's constantly going to be able to do it, and hiring a full-time position. Again, project management issues.
All right. With that, we are out of time, so I do have to wrap up the show. No, we loved having you on. So I would love to stay and talk sustainability, but I do got to wrap up the show. So thank you so much for listening to that Science and Nature show this week. Thank you, Webster. Thank you, Becky. And special guest, thank you, James and Jen. This has been very enlightening and very fascinating. I hope you guys have all the success the rest of the time you're here at UMSL with sustainability. I hope it blossoms as much as it can. But until then, or until next week, you'll hear us again at 9 a.m. on UMSL Radio. My name is Jeremy Howard. You've been listening to That Science and Nature Show, and we are out.